Welcome back to Sweet Sycamore. I'm Nicole. I just love studying the Word, and it's so much fun to do with friends, so I'm really glad you are joining me. We are in part one of a two-parter that will fall on the second and fourth Tuesdays here in March, and we are digging into the longest one-on-one conversations between Jesus and anybody in the Bible, and that is the Samaritan woman at the well. Now, if you have been joining me in this Among the 12 series, we have walked through each of the disciples and even John the Baptist last month. But now we are going to go through the Gospels as chronologically as possible. We don't really know for sure exactly the order of the stories, but if we overlap Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we can do our best in really walking through these stories and hopefully looking at it through the eyes of these disciples. Now, since we've already kind of touched on the first miracle, that water to wine story, we're going to go straight into the Samaritan woman at the well today, which we do know took place at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And I love that because this story is really going to set the tone for his ministry. Before we go into the story, though, I need to set a historical climate for you on what is really going on between the Samaritans and the Jewish people. I wanted to be a history teacher for the longest time until I realized you had to work with kids. And that's not going to happen. So we're going to take it through a biblical perspective. Are you ready? All right, so Israel was divided into two kingdoms about 930 BC. We have northern Israel and we have southern Israel. This was because of when King Solomon's son took over, there was a revolt. So that divided the nation. Now in 722 BC, the Assyrians overtook northern Israel. The Assyrians were known for their brutality. They were very, very cruel. Now, they were smart, however, in how they would take over a land. Basically, the Assyrians would come and they would take over, ship a lot of people out, but then bring a lot of people in from other nations, other countries that they had already overtaken. So they would leave some Jewish citizens and bring in a lot of other non-Jewish citizens with their gods, and then they would encourage them to intermarry. Over time, this created a cultural absorption where people would forget where they came from, but it also provided this political stability for the Assyrians. This was a way of them to dismantle people groups, and it worked for them. The assimilation took place for 117 years in northern Israel, and southern Israel just watched it happen. So 117 years later, in 605 BC, Babylon overtakes southern Israel. And the Jews in southern Israel, they would not assimilate. They had watched their brothers and sisters and what happened to them in northern Israel, and they refused to marry anybody else but Jews. They refused to take on any other gods but their gods. Now in 538, 539 BC, Persia overtakes Babylon, and Cyrus the Great, who is over Persia, releases all the Jewish people back to southern Israel to rebuild Jerusalem. He freed them to go back, to start over. Some went, and we get the books of the Bible like Nehemiah. Some didn't go. They just enjoyed living a free life in Persia, and we get the stories like Esther. Now, 183 years from the moment Assyrian has overtaken northern Israel to the moment southern Israel is now free, northern Israel is now called Samaria. And they're very much opposed to their brothers and sisters from the south going back and starting over and rebuilding to the point where they try to undermine this whole reestablishment of the nation of Israel in southern Israel. The full-blooded Jews, as they would call themselves from southern Israel, detested the Samaritans for their mixed marriages, for all the other gods that they brought in through this assimilation. So we are talking 500 plus years of hate between the Jewish people and now the Samaritans. So the Samaritans started changing the Torah, those first 5 books of the Bible, and they started saying everything that they once said took place in Jerusalem now took place there in Samaria, particularly at Mount Gerizim. So Samaria, northern Israel, they build their own temple in about 400 BC on Mount Gerizim to compete with the temple being built in Jerusalem. In 128 BC, this is 272 years after the Mount Gerizim temple has been built, Jerusalem goes up to the north and they destroy the temple. Southern or Israel's view is basically like, hey, you shouldn't be mixing other gods at the temple, and so we're wiping this out. However, the Samaritans refused to come down and worship at the temple in Jerusalem, but likewise, they weren't welcome to do that either. Southern Israel viewed themselves as the pure remnants. So as you can probably see, there is extreme hatred and bitterness on both sides of the aisle. And this is fueled by generations and generations of hate. So that was a brief history lesson of a lot of years, but we're going to pick up in John 4, verses 1 through 5, and it will all make a little bit more sense. Here's what it says. Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John. Though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, his disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. I love this. He had to go. He had to go. The road from Judea to Galilee went through Samaria. However, if you were a good Jewish man, you would take the extra steps to walk around Samaria. You would not go through that country. Other versions of the scriptures say he needed to go. He needed to go. Why did he need to go? Jesus had an appointment. He needed to go. You see, Sychar was the capital of Samaria, and there would have been a lot of people that lived there. Now let's pick up in verses 6 through 9, staying in John 4. And it says, Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from a long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Jesus is tired and he has just had this really long walk. He is thirsty and he is sitting here next to this well. This is such a prominent well. It actually still exists today. It's in the West Bank, so I wouldn't advise visiting it, but from pictures, it looks pretty cool to actually see where this story took place. But he was alone intentionally. I mean, one of the 12 could have stayed with him. It could have been great one-on-one time, but instead he sent them all into the city of Samaria. You can tell me they probably did not want to all go, if even one of them wanted to go. Why? Because he had an appointment. He sent them all away because he was waiting for the Samaritan woman. And this woman walks up in the heat of the day, noontime. You see, it was a woman's job to fill the water pots, and most women would do it in the early morning hours or in the evening when it was so much more cooler outside. This woman is coming in the heat of the day. Why? Because she thinks nobody else will be there. Then there stands this man sitting there at the well, and as she gets closer, she's going to seem to be a Jewish man, perhaps thinking, well, that's not a problem. I would be invisible to him. Being a Samaritan and a woman, that's probably true. Now, the scriptures also refer to Jesus kind of looking like a rabbi with the cloak that he would wear. And a good rabbi, did you know, they would not even speak to any women in public. In fact, historically, it tells us that if they were ever to see their wife in town, they wouldn't even acknowledge them. It would not be good for my marriage. So I am so glad I did not live back then. But, because I would have some words. I don't know about you guys. But with that, all of these things, she had to be like, he is not going to even acknowledge me. I am safe walking by this man. And yet he asked her for a drink from her cup. So you have to understand, this did really surprise her. "You are a Jew," she says. And I don't think this was a kind term. I mean, it was like Jew, you know. "I am a Samaritan woman." This is a double whammy. Who are you asking me for a drink? This is a shock and awe question in my mind. I think, Jesus, why wouldn't you ask her? Like, why wouldn't you say, "Can I get you a drink?" Like, be a gentleman, right? But the other thing I have learned in walking with Jesus for like 35 years is that when Jesus is pursuing me, and he has done, and he's going to continue to do so, like, he asks for my participation. He desires this relationship with me. He doesn't force himself on me. And therefore, when we meet, he wants us to engage. He will ask something from me. And I love how he asked this woman with a please. This isn't like a demanding. This is a requesting. Let me ask you this question. When have you had an encounter with Jesus? Those moments when you may not have known that you were getting ready to have an appointment with Jesus. But he knew he was going to have an appointment with you. When I was 28 years old, I was in the middle of my master's in theology, but I was getting ready to graduate within about 9 months. And I wanted so badly to find my person, to find my husband. It seemed like everybody else had found theirs. I mean, I was from Indiana. I feel like you got married, you had kids. That's what you did. And here I am, and I can't find anybody. And I was so sad. I mean, so sad for days. And I lived in this Pasadena home with a lot of girls. And I went to the bathroom, and I just remember walking out of the bathroom, just still sad. And I heard, "You already know him." And I paused, looked around, and I couldn't find anybody. I knew it was the voice of the Lord. And then I thought, oh no, Lord, please no, because I thought of everybody I ever knew. You see, I honestly think that we have these encounters when we least expect it. Could we be missing daily encounters where he is waiting for us because we are so caught up in the emotions? I think about this woman, and I think about the story of what if I was at the store and just buying some bottled water and somebody came up to me and started talking to me that I didn't expect talking to me, and as we're going to see, starts telling me all my sins in my life. I'd be dropping that bottle of water and running away going, "You are just crazy." But this woman sat and she engaged with Jesus. As always, I like to leave you with some questions so we can take this a step further to make this really practical in your life. But let me ask you, when have you had an appointment with Jesus? Maybe something recently. And taking a step deeper, what level of participation did he request of you? Did he ask you to do something for him, or let go of something, maybe give up something, or pick up something, or maybe just open a part of your heart that you have had closed off? That day, I had to trust him that perhaps I did already know him, because believe it or not, about 2 months later, I re-met my childhood friend, and that is my husband today. But I had to let go of the funk that I was in, this little 2-year-old Christian tantrum, and start trusting him, letting go of the barriers. And the Samaritan woman had to let go of some barriers too. Basically, I love this because Jesus shows up for her in this intimate appointment. And now the decision is in her court. You see, this woman sets the course for the gospel of Jesus. And we're going to get into that in the next story to come, because she's going to think her life was too far gone. She's going to think her views of the world and her choices within the world were too far gone to encounter the Messiah. But Jesus found her worthy to send everybody else away to wait with her in the heat of the day after a long walk, so thirsty, because he couldn't wait to start this conversation. I don't know where you're at today, but I hope you know that Jesus wants so badly to start a conversation with you, and that you are never too far gone. We have just scratched the surface of the story, and we're going to dig in even deeper in our next devotion. Until then, I hope you keep your eyes open and your ears open to the encounters that Jesus wants to have with you.